Amy, there are so many remarkable currents in this book. One of the most fascinating and, in my view, the one that makes it such a thrill to read page to page is the account you give of Newman as a person who was involved in a restless act of self-creation, of self-fashioning, of becoming Barnett Newman. That act of self-creation is visible in virtually everything Barney did. It's there, of course, in the paintings, which we'll talk about. It's also there in the clothes he wore, in the car he drove, in the letters he wrote, how he signed his name. And at its deepest level, in some sense, this is my experience while reading, that restless desire to self-create, to announce himself, was something like the motivating force that drove Barney's project throughout the course of his life. And early in the book, you quote William Rubin, MoMA's influential director of the Department of Painting and Sculpture, who spoke to this aspect of Barney's character, I think about 20 years after his death, and I wanted to read this because it's such an evocative phrase. Barney, this is Rubin talking, Barney preconceived Barney Newman. That is, the man I knew didn't simply paint these pictures. The pictures were painted by a painter conceived by the man I knew. In this phrasing, it's almost as if Barnett Newman himself is one of Barnett Newman's greatest works. And so let's start with the beginning of that process of creation, this fantastic early photograph that you'd include. I will say that I'm going to refer to a lot of archival material because one of the really delicious aspects of the book is how much archival material, Amy, you share with us, things that I've never seen, I'm sure many people here have never seen, so we're gonna enjoy those together. But let's start here with Barney, circa 1920. He's about 15 years old. What can you tell us about the Barney Newman we see in this photograph?
So, thank you. That was an excellent summation. I sort of feel like my work here is done.
Just started. We're only 5 minutes in.
So, here he is at a time when many people, I'm sure, presented themselves in photographs like this, very confident. He's sort of comme il faut dressed for that moment of his life and the culture. But in fact, it's a little deceptive because his life had only fairly recently become that sort of young American teenager standing in a sort of park-like surroundings. And one of the many agenda I gave myself in the book was to really embed him in his moment. And so to get to this moment, we went back to, of course, this is now in the Bronx, and the Bronx was a very, it was almost rural. It was very park-like. There were more parks in the Bronx than anywhere else in New York. It was just beginning to be developed when the subways came there. And so all of this, you could look at this picture with his arms crossed and he looks very established, but it's all kind of brand new. He was born on the Lower East Side, on one of the worst blocks on the Lower East Side. His family were not dirt poor, but they were, as many families were, very aspirational. They actually succeeded in fairly quickly getting out of the worst block on the Lower East Side and up to the Bronx, which made them really kind of middle class, but it's all very brand new.
When you say them, let's talk about them. Abraham, Barney's father, and his mother, Anna, they are Jewish immigrants who arrived from Poland in 1900.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about Barney's home? I think you use, one of the great expressions that you use in painting the picture of this period of Barney's life, and it's a portrait of a lot of Jewish homes in the city at the time, was intensely intellectual and philosophically disputatious.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that has to do with Abraham. So
yes.
Tell us a little bit about him, what he was committed to as a person, what kind of guy he was.
So Abraham was, Barney tells, oh, let me just back up for a moment. A lot of the received history of Barney's family comes from two books that Thomas Hess, the former editor of Art News and later Art in America, but in these years of Art News, Hess wrote two books, one the year before Barney died and one the year after, that tell basically the same story of Barney's history. And it was spoon-fed to Hess by Barney. And people, most historians and critics in the last 50 years have assumed that it's true because it came from the horse's mouth. And based on, I have the receipts, what can I say? Based on primary source research, I, in the book, go into a lot of it was not quite true, and or tweaked in a way that tells you a lot about Barney, of why he tweaked it that way. So Abraham, in those books, Abraham is a great rabbinical scholar who left Poland. In Poland, he was a secretary to one of his uncles, who was a great rabbinical scholar and rabbi. And the story, as Barney told it, was that he, Abraham, wrote the responsa, which was a classic formula for, it was an exercise, in Talmudic disputation, and every scholar would issue various responsa. There was that aspect of Abraham, and there was also the aspect of Abraham that he was in the Tsarist army for, I think, 5 years, and sent to Moscow and spent a lot of time in the Tsar's art collections. Both of those stories are very unlikely. But they have some seeds of truth, and certain members of Abraham's family were scholars. More in Barney's mother's family, that was the case. They were a little better off. But it's an important story because Abraham had that aspiration. And whether or not Barney told it that way because he heard it from Abraham and he believed it, that's possible. Or
he needed it as a part of his own story.
He needed it for his
own myth.
Yes.
Right.
What's called his good blood.
Right.
To show his good ancestry. But certainly his mother was very, very culturally aspirational. So his father was very serious. He was in the garment business. That's where he made a living. But he was a very serious Zionist.
Which will come back in Barney's own life.
Very important. And that makes you that is not consistent with being necessarily a Talmudic scholar.
Right.
It's, in fact, sort of at cross purposes. So the Zionists were committed to a kind of secular nationalism, and the scholars were committed to studying the ancient texts. So Barney has a little of both of those aspects, the incredible sort of political involvement in American culture and American society, and also a familiarity with texts in a kind of intellectual way, as opposed to a pious way.
We'll come back to that when we discuss Barney's own relationship to writing. The thing I wanted to highlight that was so interesting in reading the book was how Barney had, from the beginning, a creative attitude toward his own biography that will come, but you say, that's to put it, that's to be sort of charitable.
Yes.
But as we move forward to get to another topic that I think will be of interest to people here, certainly, although Barney seems to not have been a particularly precocious or impressive student in some ways, I think Morris Raphael Cohen says that he was sure that he would never get anywhere. School was very important to him, particularly his studies here at the Art Students League. Barney enrolls, I think, when he is this age, in around 15, 22 maybe.
Right.
Yeah, and he studies with John Sloan, and one of the people...
Not then.
That's later.
He studies with Sloan later. When he enrolls while he's still in high school,
right.
He's only
cutting class.
It was a deal he cut with his mother that he was really a truant.
Right.
And his father insisted that he finish high school, and he cut a deal that his mother, who was very aspirational, piano lessons, oratory, many lessons in the house. So the going to get art lessons was right up her alley, but she let him go, I think, it was 6 afternoons, but it was kind of after school.
Right.
He had to leave school a little early, but it was William Van Schlegel.
Initially.
Then.
Yeah.
Not until later, I think.
23, 24?
23, once he was in college.
Yeah.
He came back and he studied with, 22, he studied antique drawing with Duncan Smith. 23, when he was in college, he studied life drawing and composition in the evenings with William Van Schlegel. There's no hard evidence that he took anything with Sloan until 1930.
Got it.
And he came back when he was already out of college, and he was trying to get licensed to be an art teacher in the city public schools, and he needed more hours of practical study. He just didn't have the study time.
Right. Let's talk about some of the people he met here at the League.
Yes.
Many of his most important relationships as a young man were formed here.
Yes.
I think we should talk first about Adolf Gottlieb,
Yes.
and then maybe about a figure who I was not familiar with, Alexander Borodulin. Let's first talk about Gottlieb.
Okay.
And sort of their friendship seems to have been not only sort of pivotal, but almost romantic in how much affection they had for each other and how important they would be to each other. Kind of platonic affair that they had almost.
I think that he met Gottlieb. It's not clear that he met Gottlieb at the League, because when he first came to the League, 1922, Gottlieb was in Europe.
Yeah.
So, but I think he was tipped off to go to the League by Gottlieb. So we think maybe he met Gottlieb even earlier through family or through Borodulin. It's not clear how any of them actually immediately met. And I tried to work this out with Borodulin's son. So I got very close to the source, and he has had his father's papers. But they were very good friends. And Gottlieb, what Sam is talking about is Barney would latch on to figures that whom he admired. And here was Gottlieb actually living the life of an artist, virtually the same age, but not so beholden to his family that he didn't run off to Europe, not finishing high school, run off to Europe, go to the all the schools in Europe, travel around, see the museums. Barney never did that. He didn't do that till the 60s.
Do you think that
the
he...
1960s.
Do you think that so he admired, another thing that comes across with Barney again and again is trying to claim his right to have an autonomous existence, to declare himself and be, sort of attain a kind of freedom, and is admiring all of these friends who seem to be doing that while he himself feels constrained from doing so.
Yes, incapable.
Right.
For whatever reason, incapable of doing it.
And in this period, he is around artists, he's interested in art, but he's doing almost everything he can to avoid practicing art in a certain sense.
Absolutely.
Odd jobs, he's leading a theater troupe, he's writing poetry.
Yes.
He's also running for mayor of New York.
Well, he and Borodulin had this idea. Because for him, he could never actually conceive of art being worth doing. He felt it was something he had to do or be, but he couldn't separate it from, as he said a little later, taking the meaning of your life seriously. So there was a lot of cogitation. He couldn't just launch into the doing because it seemed pointless to him. Mm-hmm. It had to have some meaning. And the meaning had to be something that reflected back on how seriously he took his own life. Not in a narcissistic way,
right,
but in a
deep way.
In a deep way.
Yeah. You use the phrase searching for a subject. He felt that he had to arrive at a subject that was
a little later.
Right.
But the running for mayor was because he thought artists should be addressing these important societal issues. So it was even before he was really looking for a subject. He knew that whatever it was going to be, you had to be addressing the world you lived in,
right,
in a meaningful way. And so it was a very utopian platform. They had a very elaborate platform.
Right.
But it was very utopian. Frankly, ultimately, a lot of the things actually happened.
Right. You mentioned that, was it Elizabeth Halpert who ends up... Edith Halpert, sorry, yeah. Who ends up realizing one of Barney's early ambitions, which is to have municipal art galleries.
Yeah.
Right. So he's prescient as always. Around this time is also another important moment. Of course, he meets Annalee.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's just share with everybody what kind of person Annalee was. You cast her as one of kind of three remarkable women in Barney's life who he admired and respected. To me, it's Annalee, it's his sister Sarah, and it's Betty Parsons, who we'll talk about. But first, Annalee. She comes across as smart, charismatic, and totally devoted to Barney.
Yes, totally. So Annalee was, her parents were Russian Polish immigrants, and they had actually gone to Palestine. So Annalee and her sister were born in Palestine, and they were I didn't go as deeply into her background, researching her family's background, but they were a little better off than Barney's family. They settled in Ohio, and her father was an engineer and of some sort, and he was he an engineer? He had a soda bottling delivery.
Impressive in its own way.
Right, plant or house. He bottled soda, and they had a horse that delivered the soda around.
Sure.
But he invented a way to carbonate soda more efficiently, and he actually took it several steps up, and they were a little better off than Barney's family. Then they moved to New York, and Annalee and her sister went to college in New York, and Annalee became a teacher. Annalee had actually spent a semester or a year in France, which was, I think, unusual for a Jewish girl at that time, studying in France. And so she was more cosmopolitan, but also awkward, a very awkward person. Her sister was much prettier. Everybody said her sister was prettier.
Yeah.
Everybody in the family treated her sister
Regarded her
better.
that way, yeah.
And she was very awkward. She had a very awkward voice. And she and Barney met at a school where they were both teaching. And I have no record of him ever having a relationship before Annalee.
It's so funny. I'm just realizing that now, and having read the book, it was almost kismet.
Yes.
Fated that
Although she had had a boyfriend.
Of course.
Before, at least one. And that's an interesting story. We want to leave not too much of it said.
The biographer has to have limits as well, discretion.
And they just were perfect for each other. He was everything that, she was a very sort of romantic young woman, read a lot of romantic novels, and was looking for a sort of genius that she could devote her life to. And she identified Barney as that, and in some way created him.
Right.
He needed that. Unlike the way her family treated her, his family of 4 children treated him as the genius. So it was just a completely natural handoff for Barney. A lot of their friends called them Barney. For Annalee, too, later they called them Barney. To hand off the cultivation, the care and feeding of the genius to her. And she always worked. She worked several jobs, teaching, day jobs, night school. She got a business degree. She taught business.
While also very much, I get the sense that she is very active in his career as well, not only supporting him financially, but also as a kind of trusted advisor.
That came a little later, when he had a career.
Right.
Because for a long time, they were married in 1936, and he didn't have a career for 12 years.
Right.
So she would write letters. She spent the summers with her family on the Jersey Shore. He spent his summers in New York, going to movies late at night and trying to write a history of the civil service, taking on various campaigns for various rights of various groups of people.
While also trying to establish his own profile.
But not painting.
Not as an artist.
As an artist, as a theorist.
This is our
over
next
the
subject.
12 years.
Yeah. So this was another and this brings up Barney's relationship to that third powerful woman, Betty Parsons.
Yes.
As you say, sort of Barney, the road to him becoming an artist runs through him first becoming a theorist. And we sort of see for years him preparing, as a writer, preparing the ground for himself as a painter. And it starts really with these essays that he's writing in conjunction with shows he's doing with Betty Parsons.
Yes.
So first, can we talk about Betty a little bit? She'll come up again later, but how did they meet, and I think what I was really interested in is what Betty saw in Barney to make her trust him so much. Because it's Barney that's bringing Betty artists. It's Barney that's deciding what shows she'll do. So tell us a little bit about their meeting.
So Betty Parsons was a fascinating person, very upper class, gay, in an unfortunate marriage to somebody else, very upper class, totally different society, many upper class friends, people with money, people with means to socialize, collect art, travel, summers in Europe and summers in Newport. Now, I believe they met. So Barney, through Gottlieb, by the early 40s, Barney already knew Rothko through Gottlieb and a number of other artists whose names are not necessarily as familiar today.
He knows John Graham. He knows a lot of the principal figures who would form the New York School. Barney's there at the ground floor.
Yes, and he would spend summers. He started, I think, in the early 40s to spend summers with the artists in Maine or on Cape Cod. And I think it was through Rothko that he met Betty Parsons, possibly at one of these summer sort of artist camps. And Barney talked, and he talked, and he talked, and he talked, and he had these ideas about art reaching for something greater than virtuosity, entertainment, talent, skill, the meaning. And it wasn't spiritual. It wasn't something sort of religious, but it was something that declared the importance of human beings, dignity. He famously said, the defense of dignity is the ultimate subject matter of art. Everything else is chaos. And it was all about an insistence of a person's life having meaning. And that what a work of art had to do, he said, when you stood in front of it, was, I should get it exactly right.
I'm looking at my citations.
That he distinguished between a place and no place at all. And the greater the work of art, the greater this feeling will be. So that you actually have identified a place where you exist. And that's a relationship you have with the work of art. That's why the book is called Here. And he found that ultimately in various physical manifestations, like the mounds in Ohio, the Native American mounds that were built in Ohio, and he found it in the idea of a whiteout, which he saw in a film. And at this point, when he was writing, he found it in tribal art, because he hypothesized he didn't have as much information as he thought he did, or he claimed he did, but he hypothesized that the first artistic acts were a declaration of existence. They weren't to be decorative.
Right.
They weren't to be some sort of story, but they were to be a declaration of existence, and that the first people who did these created their own gods to declare their place in life.
We have the title of one of Barney's famous essays is helpful here. The first man was an artist.
Was an artist.
So kind of the original moment of existence is the aesthetic moment. And Barney's trying to find a way to arrive at that himself, to both understand that idea in these early essays, thinking about the primitive, thinking about these earlier moments, and also to, I think, find a way where he can assert his own existence,
Yes.
how he can become an artist.
Yes.
And just this is one of the many amazing finds that I think you're responsible for, to illustrate how Barney is arriving at his status as an artist through his status as an art theorist and a writer is this fantastic page draft from his manuscript of an essay he wrote on Gottlieb and Tomeo, where, as you say, I think these are some of the earliest drawings that exist.
This is the earliest, yeah.
Right.
These that seem to exist.
Right, which is and appropriate that they are marginalia on a piece of written work.
Right.
Yeah.
There are earlier drawings that he made when he went to ornithology camp or botany camp. He and Annalee did this over the summers, and they had to draw what they saw.
Right.
These are the first that are not illustrating those
Something.
concepts.
Right.
These are the first that they're marginal.
And then we have one of the first drawings, which appears in, I think this is one of the first works that Barney ever exhibited, on the right.
Yeah, this, it is. This was, he did exhibit this one in a Betty Parsons show.
Yeah, so Northwest Coast we talked about, he exhibits it here in the ideographic picture. Just to also give you a sense, and we'll keep going in Barney's fantastic story, but Barney is responsible for the inaugural show at the Betty Parsons Gallery after she moves on from Wakefield. And then at the ideographic picture, again, he's really establishing the foundations for the New York School.
Right. So something that I just want to point out there, because this is a thread that goes through the book, he always knew how to, even before he knew what he was doing, he knew how to publicize it.
This is crucial for who he was.
Right.
Yeah.
Crucial. So that he didn't simply think, oh, well, I have an idea about tribal art, or what it was called at that time, primitive art, but let's do a show, and let's not only do a show,
Right.
And I will write the catalog essay, but I will promote it, and I know how to contact a lot of important people to get loans for the show. So immediately he had tentacles out in the world. He was never going to be just in a studio
Right.
producing work. It went together.
Right. And it does speak to how absolutely crucial he was to the New York scene. This comes up again and again, where he's not only inventing his own sort of persona, his own work, he's also providing the scene for other people to work.
Yes,
which is
especially in these years.
Right.
He's creating a scene.
Right, yeah. It's incredible. And I don't think, again, someone who I've written about Newman, I have seen the work, but that is one of many fundamental parts of his career that only struck me in the book. So I thank you for that. After he's preparing the way for himself through writing, he has, I think, another sort of maybe the crucial moment, I think you say, in his artistic life with the creation of 1-Mint-1. Not only is it sort of the first instance of what will become his sort of signature style, but it's also a pivotal moment for his narrative. He invents a story around this work, which is he'll do again and again, where he will play with dates and he'll create a myth around certain pieces that are crucial to him. And this is the first time. So tell us a little bit about that story, about the gestation period and all those great details that you uncovered.
So he finally starts to make a painting here and there. I think 4 of them maybe, or 6 of them, mostly around those botanical, like that marginalia and that first Gia. And they don't have any definitive character, but in 47, the end, mid-47, 48, I'm sorry, his father dies.
47.
47,
Yeah.
His father dies. Nobody else who has written about him has made this connection. And that's when he finds himself as an artist. There's something about, his father didn't oppose him being an artist, But there was something about his relationship, his incredibly complicated relationship with his father, that inhibited him from doing anything. He makes this painting shortly after his father dies. He says this is the first of what becomes known as his style, but in fact, it may or may not be the first.
Right.
It's not that important. It's not that important, really, if it's this one or what's now called One-Man 2. But he says he made this. He was trying out a color. He made the background. The important thing was that there was no atmosphere. It was the first painting where there was no atmosphere to oppose a figure against, so no figure ground. He painted the darker color. He put a piece of masking tape down to test another color, and then he never took the masking tape off. He decided it said everything he had to say. But he also says he looked at it for 9 months. So he says the story is he made it on his birthday, around his birthday, January 21st, 1948, 6 months after his father died. And he looked at it for 9 months and then decided that's it. He didn't have to do any more, trying to figure out what he had done. So at one mint is also the same letters as atonement. 9 months after his birthday turned out to be Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. It's got a lot of nice sort of inevitability about it.
Right, and it's another reminder of Newman's Jewishness, which comes up again and again in many complicated ways. I just wanted, you spoke to it eloquently earlier, but it's such a shocking painting, and I just wanted to quote Harold Rosenberg, who reminds us of its force when he wrote, I think this may have been in his Vogue article, he wrote, "One does not mean, it confronts. It must be grasped as a whole, must be felt as a presence. It has the intrusive arbitrariness of an act or an event." So these are serious paintings.
Yeah. That was many years later, though, that Rosenberg, after years of mocking him, wrote that.
Which is we'll come to that, a great triumph when Rosenberg.
But yes, he also said later to somebody interviewing him that he was looking for something that just is like your brain is, like your belly is. It doesn't say. Beautiful. It doesn't say.
And so after Atonement, or after One Mint, we have Newman's first show at Betty Parsons Gallery. You mentioned that Newman was a great promoter, understood promotion, understood the sort of dramaturgy of the life of the artist, and that is certainly true in the photographs that he made sure were taken of him.
Yes.
We'll see that again and again as we move along. But there's another theme. Oftentimes, as in this case, he would have friends take photographs of him. So it's kind of a
but his friends who were very good photographers.
Accomplished. It doesn't hurt that it's Aaron Siskind.
Right.
But what do you see sort of when you see this photograph of Barney? It's his first solo exhibition. He seems to be performing a certain version of the artist as he understands it. Or is that too cynical?
I think that's sort of, I think it's a little off because I think what he is performing is a version of the art.
Interesting.
Not the artist. Because they were the same. He was so identified. I mean, to be fair, and probably you said that, I say repeatedly in the book, and this is an important insight into Barney, it was always about the man for him. It was always a man. the man, the artist, rather than the artwork. It was the endeavor that was such a superior endeavor, to be a serious artist, rather than the result.
Mm-hmm.
The result, you wanted the result to be something, but what was important was the act.
Mm.
And so he was, it's almost really that he wants the painting to identify with him.
That's so well put, yeah.
You can't separate them. So
Yeah.
he wanted the painting to identify with him.
And this is that painting. We know that B1 was in the show. A work that we're less sure was in the show, and to go back to Barney's
Yes.
father, was Abraham.
Yes.
This becomes a recurrent painting, a current work
Yes.
in the book. Among other things, the relationship to Abraham also becomes crucial for Barney he'll constantly assert and reassert his claim to priority, to a kind of
Yes.
firstness. In this case, this is, he claims that this is the first, as you say, black painting.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that claim and
Yes.
why firstness became so important
Yes.
to Barney?
So I think it is, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does predate any Reinhardt black painting, and I don't think Reinhardt actually disputed that. But Still might have disputed that, because Still is very slippery. But for some reason, and this is, there's substantial writing in the book about this, for these particular men that were showing at Betty Parsons in the late 40s, Barney, Rothko, Still, Reinhardt, de Kooning wasn't showing with Betty Parsons, but it was also the case for him and many other artists around that time, that they were the first to come up with something.
Whatever it was.
Whatever it was, Pollock,
Right.
whatever it was. And it was not allowed to be just a sort of clever move in painting. It had to be something authentic. And this whole idea of authenticity at that time seems, it was so hard for me to write about, because it seems so quaint now. It seems like, what could they be thinking of? What was so, but it was so crucial at that point. And there's a great story of Milton Resnick having a dream in the early 50s where he's on trial for doing something inauthentic. That's how obsessed they were.
It's like a Camus story in the New Yorker or something. Yeah.
and even Hess in 51 wrote, "The American myth of sacrosanct originality has made the possibility of derivation more unmentionable than that of venereal disease." And in 1951, venereal disease was really unmentionable.
But not as unmentionable as being derivative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not as being derivative.
Yeah.
So Barney very likely had made this painting by his second show his first show in 1950, but it was not. There's no evidence that it was in the first show. This is just one of these, just like somebody's trying to torture you.
Yeah.
Aaron Siskin took 3 pictures of 3 walls. There's lists of what was in the show, but there's like multiple lists, and they vary.
And Barney's the only one asserting, and Anna Lee, I guess, also, that it was there.
That it was
other
in
people,
the first show.
No critics mention it.
No critics
Frank O'Hara
mention
says
it.
that's how odd that is.
No, I say that's
Right.
how odd that is.
That no one would bring it up.
Yes.
Right.
That no critic would bring up an all-black painting. They talked about all this other stuff. But it was so his first show was in January of 50, and it was in a June show, at a Betty Parsons group show in June.
He asserts that it's, as a part of his claim to firstness, he himself goes on to continues to assert that it was there.
He does. And it was noticed by the critics in June.
You mentioned some of his larger-than-life peers. Here they are, the Irascibles. This is another moment where, it's another high-water moment where Barney is becoming more known. The New York school is becoming known as a school.
Yes.
In spite of the fact that they would, that would be contentious among them. And it's also a moment where Barney is, again, managing promotion, managing the media. I'll go to the photograph itself. You talk a little bit about, you give the sense that...
I want to talk about
Yeah, please tell me.
So if you look at, we can go through everybody. I don't want to take the time, but
They can
I don't
read.
have a pointer, right? But, from the back, that's Richard Poussadar, that's de Kooning, Gottlieb, Reinhardt standing, head astern, under her, Clifford Still, Motherwell, and Bradley Walker Tomlin. Then the next row, Stamos, I always forget who that is. Jimmy Ernst, thank you very much. Barney, Brooks, Rothko. So this is it was taken at the end of November. It was taken Thanksgiving weekend at the end of November in 1950. It's in Life magazine, 1951. Briefly, it came about because Rothko, David Hare, and Motherwell, and Still decided to have a school earlier in 1950. And they established the school.
The subject of the artist.
The subject of the artist. Well, Barney named it that. He wasn't there at the beginning, but he gave them the name, the subject of the artist. They met at night, and one of the four would come around and critique paintings. Several of the four would hit on a lot of young women who came. Later, after a few months, they brought Rothko begged Barney to join them. Barney did not hit on the women. The women in themselves told me this. But then they all got bored with it. But Barney did do something that leads into the publicizing. He started having Friday night sessions where he'd bring in speakers. And these were tremendously popular. And Joseph Cornell.
John Cage.
I'm not remembering, you probably.
Gottlieb was there.
Gottlieb did it. A lot of them were invited and didn't want to speak.
And Anna Lee is sweeping up the floor and putting out drinks.
Anna Lee is renting the chairs, putting out
from the restaurant next door. Such a beautiful little detail. There are a million.
Taking the tickets of people coming in. She didn't recognize Alfred Barr. At one point, de Kooning was scheduled to speak. Then he got cold feet, and Motherwell read what de Kooning had prepared. But these nights were very, very popular. So they all got bored with the thing, with the whole school idea, but they didn't want to continue paying the rent. But they decided they couldn't just end it with nothing coming out of it. So they had in the place that they rented 3 days in April where many more artists than these showed up, I think 23, and discussed what they cared about. I mean, which is also an extraordinary thing.
I know there's kind of a elegiac quality to the book, because all of these incredible initiatives and all these gorgeous ideas we're watching them, they've either receded or we're just catching the last, as you say, they're almost unthinkable that people would get together and do that,
Yes.
which is stunning to kind of admit. It makes reading the book that much more sort of rich, because you get to re-experience those things.
Well, that was a big goal in writing the book, was try to put you into
Right.
where this was happening. But they were not all in the same position in their careers. Many of them were doing quite well. And Barney, as of this time, had one show critically received with, huh?
And his peers were also, in many cases, dismissive. They did not think that Barney was an artist. He was a professorial type, a writer, and yet, how did he manage to get into the middle of those photographs?
How did he manage to get into the center?
Yeah.
So anyway, then they decide they're going to, they have these 3 days and they come out with a report, and there's something that actually exists, which, help me out here, Robert Goodenough, who was a student at NYU at that time, published. And that's actually a fabulous document, and that should have been the record of what happened at those events. But Barney felt this was not going to be enough, so he wanted to come out with a cause, with a fighting cause. And so he wanted everybody to write a letter, to sign a letter, that the critics had not treated Clifford Stillwell. And they wrote this letter, and many of them signed it, and then at the last minute, some didn't want to sign it. So then they got rid of the Clifford Still letter, and they said, but we still have to come out with some fight. And the fight was, they decided the Metropolitan Museum was mounting a show and had sent out a letter request for proposals, basically, of having a sort of questionably juried show when they were really supposed to be using a grant that they had to buy, to put their money where their mouth was and buy contemporary paintings. And so Barney,
that's his opportunity.
That's the issue. That's the issue. So a bunch of them got together, wrote a letter, brought it up, walked it up to the Metropolitan Museum to protest. He and Reinhardt, I think, walked it up together. And then the Met got interested. It was covered.
Not the first time. I just have to say, Barney is always coming up with a cause and then conveniently writing press releases for himself to send to the nursepaper or letters that will run in the editorial pages. He does it dozens of times.
Yes. So then this was covered in some little pieces in some newspapers, but in, I guess it was the Herald Tribune, which was a newspaper at that time, unsigned but written by Emily Genauer. She said, oh, these 18 artists, they're irascible. They signed this letter. They're complaining. Now, many of those 18 were now going to be in that show, and actually were going to be in other big shows that were happening.
They were being treated fairly well.
They were. They were being treated quite well. But
it's not so convenient. That's a less dramatic story.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but nevertheless, the Life magazine gets its hands on this and says, oh, come and pose on the steps of the Met, holding your paintings, like you can't get in with your art. And Barney said, no, that's not what we do. We deserve respect. We deserve respect like bankers have respect, like any other professional. This is after he's had one show. like any other professional deserves respect. And So they said, we'll agree, and the rest of them said, sure, we'll agree to a photograph, but it has to be a serious photograph. They went to a studio, and Nina Lean set them up. Now, the choice of people, that was just who was in town and available that day. That was really it. And Barney got in the middle by, he said, and Nina Lean said, she placed them. But of course, Barney shined his shoes. He always had, or they were brand new shoes, I think.
I think Anna Lee went out and got shoes that morning.
Bought them.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the way he's dressed.
Yeah, and it's not the last time we'll see him.
That's right.
Insert himself.
So he's in the middle.
I'll zip along a little bit more quickly
sorry.
now so we can hit some of these other great high notes. This is also to me like a moment where as they become sort of gain notoriety, they also start to police their reputations, the reputations of others.
Yes.
Rivalry becomes a big theme, but before we get there, I also wanted to just let you say a few words about Barney the Mensch and the Friend. He was such a good friend to Pollock in particular.
He was such a good friend to Pollock. Their birthdays were January 21st and January 22nd, and they always celebrated them together. Barney would sometimes pick him up off the steps in front of his studio. He would dry him out.
Right.
He would take him to Ratner's, a Lower East Side restaurant that was open 24 hours.
Get a meal into
To get him a meal, yeah. He was really a close friend. When Pollock died, Barney and Annalee were, I think, among the first people out there.
And Barney was suggested by Greenberg to give the eulogy.
Yes.
That's how close they were, which is also something I did not realize, that how close the two of them were. One thing that made them so close was they were two of the painters to make the first big paintings that would define New York painting at the time. Here we have Vir Heroicus Sublimis. This is, as we zip ahead, this is another moment where dating becomes important for Barney. 1950 plus 1951, not 1950 to 1951.
Right.
Would you say why that is important?
Because he painted it without, maybe you can point to the pale stripe on the far right.
Am I still plugged in? Yeah. No? Yeah, great. Here.
And he felt it was, over time, looked at it and felt it needed something more. Although I think he said, it was complete. It was totally complete. But then I thought, it could use something more.
He says...
so that was 1951. So it was both a complete painting in 1950, and then it was another complete painting in 1951.
And then here we're sort of getting into another sort of big arc for Barney. He's hitting a high point in 51. Betty Parsons is being recognized, her gallery is being recognized as the most influential gallery. Barney is being
Well, it's important to also know that Betty Parsons was connected to all of these women in her crowd who were sort of the cultural scouts for magazines like Vogue.
Right.
And so it was a lot of people very savvy about the media.
Right.
You know, a lot
Which is so interesting because you tend to associate that with pop.
Yes.
You associate media, and engagement with the media with a later stage.
Right.
But you point out that it's such an active and omnipresent concern for this generation too. And then I also know that Barney here is pointed out as Betty's most trusted advisor.
Yes.
So he's attaining this status, but also this is the beginning of a low period for Barney.
A very low period. The second show in 51 was not just badly received by the critics, but his friends, and that was really incredibly painful to him. And so he was angry about it, but also 1952 was Dorothy Miller's 15 Americans show, And somehow Barney thought he was entitled to be in that show.
Right.
And maybe he would have been. Still claims that Rothko kept him out. Rothko claims that Still kept him out. And there are lots of letters of everybody stabbing everybody in the back.
Including Reinhardt, who we see in this image. Not
But
around 15
Reinhardt wasn't in
Americans.
the show.
No, but this is just the beginning of that period of them
it's
turning
just
on each other.
Turning on each other. But Reinhardt and Barney were very good friends, and their families were very good friends. And one of the reasons was because of Rita Reinhardt. Rita Ziparovsky, I can't remember her name. She was a refugee from Germany. For some reason, Annalee thought she was a refugee from Poland. Mm-hmm. She was a refugee from Germany. She was Jewish. She was a really lovely person. And Annalee, in some way, adopted her. Mm-hmm. And closed ranks around her and just felt in some way responsible for her. Mm-hmm. And
here she is,
encouraged Ed to hurry up and marry her. Because they were going out. They were going out.
I wanted to be sure to include this also to make sure that everyone saw Annalee there. Betty is there as well.
Yes, Betty and Tommy Sills, who was married to Jean Reynal, who was also an important woman in all of this, a mosaic artist.
And one of the things that you point out in this period, Barney goes kind of into seclusion, is not showing.
Go ahead.
Is not showing. Also becomes very sensitive to insult. That's a hugely telling part of his character.
Yes.
You bring up as an example here Clement Greenberg's famous essay, American Type Painting, where Barney takes particular issue to the tail end of that paragraph on 192, where he's presented by Greenberg as derivative of or in the mode of Clifford Still, which bothered Barney to no end.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the school of.
In the school of.
School of. Not derivative of, but school of.
Right. Why was that so insulting to him?
He wasn't in anybody's school.
Precisely, yeah. Exactly.
He wasn't in any. But the thing is that the article really goes on to say incredibly important, positive things about Barney, and the date, what's the spring? 55.
Yeah.
At this point, Barney doesn't have much of a public profile. He is painting, he is doing stuff, he has other friends, but he's not showing anywhere. And he's angry at a lot of the guys he thought were his friends previously. And here comes Greenberg, when really nothing has been written about Barney, saying he's incredibly important and advanced. And Barney can't accept it. He can't accept the praise because there's this thing about Still in there. And this goes on, his whole life. You can't accept many good articles he can't accept. And I'm going to say as an aside that I am starting to get very good reviews for this book, and they get mistakes. And they're making me crazy, and I have to be held back.
You're identifying with your subject.
I am so identified with him that I just want to write to those people.
Well, these are the unsent letters. These are the unsent letters.
Yes, put them in a drawer.
I always thought that sensitivity to insult was sort of the flip side of his investment in personal dignity.
Yes, absolutely.
He was incredibly forward and confident, but so vulnerable and thin-skinned on the other side of that. So they go together.
Absolutely.
I have this here as a placeholder for probably the lowest point, which is his heart attack. Has a heart attack in, I think, 57.
The end, November 57.
Right, but you also point out that he turned that heart attack into, again, he re-narrativizes it. He makes a myth of it, a kind of resurrection fable.
Yes.
That I think in your telling hinges on this painting a little bit, or the issue of 57, not painting in 57.
Right.
Yeah.
See, so the heart attack is at the end of 57. By early 57, life has gotten pretty good for him. He's not writing these very angry letters anymore. He's met B.H. Friedman, Bob Friedman, who is a collector and an important friend who introduces him to a lot of other people, notably critics in England and collectors in England, which becomes tremendously important for him. He's met Ben Heller, who is phenomenally important to him, a collector, and he's having a good time. He's good friends with Alexander Lieberman, and his life is really he's got a very nice life. So it's not an unhappy period, but the story, the received story, is that he went into such a funk after 55, he didn't paint after 55, and then has the heart attack, and he made no paintings in 56 and 57, then has the heart attack, and it's a rebirth. And then but the dates of this painting, so this painting is 55, and again, people don't have to believe me, but I have the receipts.
I found it convincing.
I have the paint receipts.
Yeah, when she says receipts, it's literally receipts for purchased gallons of paint.
Of this color.
Yeah.
Of this color.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of paintings of this color, which I feel like are very hopeful and uplifted paintings compared to some of the things he had been doing. And the paint is being bought in 57.
Right.
So I'm convinced that, but it's funny that you would date it earlier for...
This is the official dating.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I bring this up because it's another instance like One Meant One, where he is he's rolling up his sleeves and shaping his own biography very actively. This is sort of the last sort of period where I sort of read this as a suite of sort of Barney's ascendance. He goes from having been in some ways neglected, you mentioned 15 Americans, and then toward the end of his life, he starts being included in all these exhibitions that kind of correct the historical record. In some ways, remarkably, according to along the lines that Barney established.
Well, that's not so remarkable because he only would show
in those
paintings that he made before 52,
right?
Until the date of 15 Americans. When he showed, is this French?
No, this is the MoMA show.
Oh, this is the MoMA show.
Yeah, we'll get to French in a second.
Yes, so this is a traveling show sent by Museum of Modern Art, which I think only included paint. So the date of that is 58, 59, it traveled for a year in Europe, but he only let them include paintings that he did up to 52, the date of 15 Americans. And then he has this...
I just want to underscore that. You glance over these things that are so incredible that you're so familiar to you, but he is only participating in these shows that allow him to recast this early period that he felt was misrepresented. It's remarkable. He's his own
curator.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. He's his own curator. And then it continues with French and Company.
Yes. And so French and Company, so Clement Greenberg is mounting shows at Bennington and does a show of Barney's. And then at the same time, French and Company, which has always shown old masters and old furniture, decides to open a contemporary
gallery space.
And Clement Greenberg is going to be running it, and so he shows Barney as the first show. because Barney had some very good promoters. I mean, Carmen Greenberg's a critic, and he chose artists that he sort of promoted. Barney was lucky with Greenberg. Hess and Rosenberg hated him
For years.
until 1959, and that's a very long story that we don't have time to go into.
Read the book.
But it's in the book. And then they flipped. Hess and Rosenberg, who just mocked him mercilessly, flipped on him and became huge fans, and also like family. And then Alexander Lieberman always did very well in Vogue with Barney.
Right, and this is also just an example. You mentioned Rosenberg coming around. Rosenberg ends up writing what he proudly declares is a hagiographic essay.
Yes.
So he goes from being incredibly critical of Barney to mocking brutally, to writing this hagiography of Barney using Barney's own ideas.
Yes.
So he's
It's always.
you have this thing where you see the myth of Barnett Newman that he himself has authored hardening for posterity in these exhibitions and in these essays, which is also there's an emotional element to that. You sort of feel after this man who's been, in his view, sort of beset by hostility and treated unfairly, gets his due in the end, which makes the closing chapters of the book quite touching, I think. I just want to make sure we get to a couple of these other moments, because there's another great sort of late chapter is Barney starts to receive all this adulation from the younger generation. He was rivalrous with his own peers, but then gets this tremendous wave of support by people like, here we see him at the Jewish Museum for the opening night of Robert Rauschenberg's retrospective, surrounded by everybody.
In the middle. Somehow
again.
He's in the middle.
Like the Irascibles photo.
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to mention Caprow, what he says. Caprow is on the bottom right there. This is an essay that's in Art News. Caprow writes, Newman begins with the trial of a premise of a perfect vision in a calm, unruffled world, and ends with a cataclysm, the flood of utter chaos, of sheer color inundating us, of lines crashing into splinters and vanishing into the vibrating deluge, is the terror Barnett Newman refers to when he speaks of his work. This terror and passion is as close to our marrow, as unsettling to us emotionally as anything of Pollock's. So Barney is being apotheosized by this generation coming up after him. And it continues with, this, and here we're really getting to the close, so I want to make sure that people can ask questions as well. This period, though, as he's being, raised to the highest echelons, it's also the most daring, in some ways, phase of his artistic production.
Yes.
Broken Obelisk.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Or even the Stations of the Cross.
Right.
But Broken Obelisk, it's just characterologically, he could not resist responding to things. So everything, he couldn't resist responding to his critics, he couldn't resist responding to events in the world, whether he was writing in the 30s or whether he was painting in the 40s. And he couldn't resist, in some way, responding to things that were happening in the art world, but nevertheless, in his way. He wasn't going to change his style. He wasn't going to change who he was. And in the late 60s, now he's only made 116 or so paintings in his life. It's a very, very limited number. And he's made, I think, 4 sculptures up to this point, and they're all human-sized sculptures. But in the late 60s, there is really a big movement to very large-scale, site-specific outdoor sculpture. this is just beginning. I mean, we take this stuff for granted now.
Right.
This is just beginning. The federal government sponsored it. There were foundries that outfitted themselves to be able to actually fabricate these things, but none of that existed before. And there were two shows, one a outdoor sculpture in New York when it was called Fun City in 1967, of something like 25 artists deciding what they wanted to show and deciding where. And the Corcoran in Washington invited 3 artists to create monumental, site-specific work. 3 artists.
Yeah.
Tony Smith was making monumental sculpture. He was a sculptor. Ron Bladen was making monumental sculpture. Barney wasn't. I don't know how Barney got invited to that show, but Barney was invited to that show. And so there was a combination of, I don't know which came first exactly, the Corcoran invitation or the New York show, but Barney is now making a monumental sculpture.
And arguably one of the most famous monumental sculptures for the years in the country.
Well, I don't think we have time.
Okay.
It's really good story in the book. It's a really good story. There's so much in this sculpture. You know, you walk right by it now in the Museum of Modern Art and it's like, oh yeah, we know that. It's an icon. But there is so much history and response.
Right.
Just like his father supposedly wrote the Responsa in Poland, it's a responsa to 1967 in America.
I encourage you to read that chapter as well. And then we'll just round it out with sort of the last few moments of Barney's ascent. Here we have another fantastic Vogue piece with Barney standing in his sort of final form, in tweed with the monocle in front of one of his fantastic Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue. And again, I'll just note the sort of title of the piece, Revolutionary Genius into American Classic. He's installed in history. The historical record is also corrected, again, sort of by MoMA with the New American Painting and Sculpture, which is understood as a response or a correction to 15 Americans. So Barney gets his wish in that regard as well. And then I'll just put up, as we can take questions, the posthumous retrospective that MoMA does in 71. So yeah, I know that we went on a little bit long. I'd love it if all of you had chances to ask Amy questions if you're available.
I'm available.
Perfect. Thank you for the talk.